This week on Fantasy Football Reporters, we have a weekend review, the Beast and Bust, the Bonehead Play of the Week. We have an injury update. But first off, we have our first ever winner of our Fantasy Football Reporters Stat Challenge. So congratulations, Scott Lacey of Hanson, Massachusetts. You slightly beat out Mitch Kirkland for the Deion Branch signed Super Bowl picture 5x7 with certificate of authenticity.
8x10.
8x10, excuse me, I said 5x7. 8x10. And we're going to pass it over to Sean here to talk about the new Stat Challenge.
Yep, this week's prize is right here. It's a signed Lawyer Milloy photograph from when he was on the Patriots. Believe it or not, Lawyer Milloy is still playing. So in week 4, you're going to have to guess his stat line. The 3 stat categories that you're going to have to guess are going to be solo tackles, assisted tackles, and interceptions. So go to the site for more details on the stat challenge. We're going to move right along to the week 3 in review. First off, we have Indy and Denver squaring off in Denver. Despite Kyle Orton throwing for close to 500 yards, Denver goes 0 for 5 in the red zone. Frank, who can you trust on this Denver team on your fantasy roster?
I mean, at this point, Kyle Orton is playing out of his head. I mean, he's playing out of his head. I trust him a lot. Jabbar Gaffney's looked great. Brandon Lloyd's looked great. No-Sean was doing all right for me until he went down on a Thursday or a Friday practice, random hamstring injury. Thank you, No-Sean. I appreciate that a lot. So, I don't know. Lawrence Maroney, terrible.
Terrible.
So just don't go with him.
Yeah.
But back to Sean for some more.
Yeah. From the other side of the sideline, no real surprises. Manning goes for 325 and 3 touchdowns. Austin Carley going bananas this year. What do you think, Frank?
It's tough with Indy. Indy's got a lot of weapons. I know Gasson was injured this past week, so Carley looked great. Dallas Clark obviously is a big weapon, and Reggie Wayne always. But yeah, Austin Carley's having a great year, and I expect him to continue to do so.
Now, moving on, did you have Roy Williams starting for your squad this week?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Well, that's because he's only owned in 5% of leagues, and he's starting in just a fraction of those 5%. However, if you read my work in the waiver wire column last week, you would have seen that I told you to scoop him up against a terrible Houston pass defense.
It's true.
Just terribleness from Houston mostly all around, except for Arian Foster. Schaub throws for 241 yards, 2 interceptions, and he gets his lone touchdown with a minute to go in the game. So Arian Foster, like I said, continues to impress with 6.2 yards per carry and 106 in the game, although he did lose a fumble. Moving on to the Philadelphia Michael Vicks versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Frank, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Jaguar players who are worth a spot on your fantasy roster?
At this point, I got nothing.
Exactly. So now, the Philadelphia Michael Vicks. 4 touchdowns total, just under 300 yards passing. Is this the best you've seen Mike Vick play through his career?
Yeah, absolutely. He's been playing out of his head. I mean, I don't know why. He was decent with Atlanta, but he was a turnover machine then, and now he's taking care of the ball. I don't think he has a turnover yet.
No,
he's played great.
We knew he could run the ball, and we just didn't know that he could pass the ball like this. I mean, 3 throwing touchdowns, and he ran 1 in for a score. So
True.
Now we're moving on to the Bonehead Play of the Week. This week we're going to go to the New York Giants, Eli Manning. He drops back to pass here. He eludes the rush a little bit, steps up, and for some reason, he switches to his left hand, freeze it right there, switches to his left hand, and right now we have Eli Manning live in studio. Eli, what were you thinking about on that play?
Honestly, Sean, I don't know. I figured I'm terrible passing the ball righty. I might as well try it lefty. Just don't know. I really was just trying to be a hero out there, and where's David Tyree when you need him? I just don't know.
Anything else to add to that, Eli?
Honestly, Sean, for a split second, for some reason, I can't tell you why, I was thinking about Michael Strahan's huge gap in his teeth. I'm not sure why. Again, I have nightmares about it still to this day. It's just absolutely frightening for some reason, and I got really scared and just threw up a terrible play.
All right, yeah, that's an interception in the red zone. Never good. Well, thanks for joining us, Eli, and we look forward to having you in studio many more times this year for the Bonehead Play of the Week. Now, we're going to move on to injuries. Nothing too major this week. Did have Steven Jackson leave the game with a groin injury after MRIs Monday. He tweeted that it was just a strain, and you want to watch his status throughout the week, make sure he's practicing. He's pretty much a workhorse, so I expect him to play next week. Ryan Matthews was inactive against the Seahawks, although Matthews says he is getting better with each day. I doubt that he'll be practicing much this week, so he's probably going to be a game-time decision on Sunday. Javid Best hurt his big toe in Sunday's game. He had trouble putting weight on it after the game, and if you have other options next week, it might not be a bad idea to sit him because he's going up against the Green Bay defense, who's pretty good against the run. Then we had Ray Rice. He just tweaked his knee, and at this point, you want to watch his status throughout the week again. Doesn't look like it's anything serious, but just make sure he's practicing. And Demaryius Thomas, who I told you to pick up in my waiver wire column this week, he left the game early with a hand and wrist injury. He had x-rays Monday, and Coach McDaniels has taken the Belichick approach, not really saying much about it. When asked if he thought Demaryius Thomas would be okay, he said, "I think so," and then he moved on. So right now I'm going to pass it back over to Frank for the weekly Beast and Bust.
Thank you, Sean.
Yep.
Aaron Rodgers and pretty much the entire Green Bay team against Detroit. I think Brandon Jackson will have a good week, but Aaron Rodgers especially and the wide receiver core, I believe they're going to have a really good week. Moving on to Cedric Benson. He had a great week this week. He had over 25 points in most fantasy football leagues. He's playing Cleveland this week. We expect him to also have a very good week. Malcolm Floyd, who Sean likes a lot, one of his sleepers this year, had a lot of targets last game, and he actually played very well. And they're playing Arizona this week coming up, so we expect him to also have a very big week. Pierre Thomas, with Reggie Bush injured, we expected him to do all right this past week. He did all right, mediocre game. We expect more from him. He's playing Carolina this week. We expect them to, give him the ball a lot against Carolina. And MJD, we're reporting, is going to find the end zone this week against Indianapolis. Our cameraman here actually drafted him pretty early, and he is hoping that he does. So MJD for sure this week against Indy. He should have a good game, and he will find the end zone. As for our bust, Charlie Batch and Rasad Mendenhall against Baltimore Ravens. And if you're starting Charlie Batch, first off, you're not doing pretty good at all. I mean, and I probably could have started him this past week because Kevin Cobb was my starter, which was a nightmare in one league. But yeah, bench Charlie Batch and Mendenhall. You should start him unless you have some really good other options. But he is playing a great Ravens defense. Moving on to Buffalo, they just released Trent Edwards today. Not that was a big deal at all. Ryan Fitzpatrick looked all right against New England, but you're gonna have to bench everybody on their team. Everybody they're playing the Jets. I expect the Jets to come back a lot better this week after playing terrible against Miami. Brandon Marshall had a big week, which we thought. I thought he wasn't going to have that big of a week at all last week. He was one of our busts, but he went nuts, and actually Chad Henne threw for over 350. So we expect Buffalo to be in for a treat against the New York Jets this weekend. Finally, LaShawn McCoy versus Washington. Sean talked a lot about Michael Vick. I mean, it seemed like McCoy was just not even involved in the offense very much at all this week, and Vick's been playing out of his head. Washington's a pretty good, decent defense, so we expect McCoy to have another mediocre day against Washington. And finally, Andre Johnson, as Sean alluded to, he's already dealing with an ankle injury, which has been lingering all year. He's playing Oakland, who's not very good, but Ashamoah is a great corner, an all-pro corner every single year. So I think we expect Andre to have, again, another mediocre day. So yeah, pass it back to you for...
All right. Yeah, we're going to start a brand new segment this week on Fantasy Football Reporters. It's going to be called Rapid Fire Reporters, which is basically a name association game. I'm going to throw a name out. Frank is going to say the first thing that comes to his mind. First off, David Garrett.
Turnover machine. This is the worst, and this is David Garrett right now. I can't even tell you.
Eli Manning.
The worst Manning. Archie's got nothing on me.
Mike Vick.
Beating up on dogs and NFL defenses.
True story. Kyle Orton.
Undercover fantasy football beast.
Adrian Peterson.
Freak of nature.
Peyton Hillis.
White men can't jump.
That's a great movie.
That is.
All right, that's all we got for you on Fantasy Football Reporters Live this week. That's it.
You stay classy, Michael Strahan. Check out fantasyfootballreporters.com.